What if Naruto traveled to Hunter x Hunter universe? Part 9. Jing looked down at his right hand. His knuckles were red, smoking slightly, and a thin, clean line of blood was leaking across his palm. A slow, genuinely stunned look crossed his face, before dissolving into a massive, booming laugh that echoed out into the dark jungle. Well, I'll be damned, Jing said, shaking his bruised hand out and looking up at the trio. You actually held the line. Jing let out one final chuckling sigh, the sound disappearing into the vast hum of the alien wilderness. He tore off the remaining tatters of his shredded right sleeve and casually tossed the scrap cloth aside. All right, a deal's a deal, Jing said, his posture relaxing into a loose, unbothered stance that looked entirely too much like Naruto's casual slouch. You stood your ground against a real strike. Your raw defensive output is there, Gon. I won't force you onto the extraction boat. Yes. Gon cheered, though the sudden movement made him wince, his bruised, purple-tinted arm shaking as the adrenaline began to clear out of his system. Kahlua moved instantly to his side, his hands radiating a faint, cool hum of mild electricity as he lightly checked the joints of Gon's wrist and elbow. Don't celebrate too hard, idiot. Your muscles are completely micro-torn from the kinetic feedback. If you try to punch anything else in the next 12 hours, that arm is going to snap like a twig. I'm fine, Kahlua, Gon grinned weakly, though he let Kahlua support his weight. We're staying. Yeah, we're staying, Naruto sighed loudly, dropping straight down onto a nearby stone block with a heavy thud. He slouched forward, resting his chin in his hands as he looked over at Jing. But man, trading blows like that right after a cross-continental flight is just exhausting. You free CSS guys have way too much energy. What a total drag. Get used to it, kid, Jing said, walking over to his pack and pulling out a roll of thick, coarse canvas wrap and a jar of pungent, dark green ointment. He tossed them straight to Kahlua. Smear that on his arm. It's crushed leech root paste. It'll draw out the internal swelling in an hour, but it tastes like garbage and smells worse. Kahlua caught the jar, sniffing it cautiously before wrinkling his nose in immediate disgust. Smells like a dead swamp frog. It works, Jing muttered. He turned his attention back to Naruto, his sharp eyes locking onto the glitched binder resting against the ninja's hip. Now, let's talk about that book of yours. The energy pulsing out of slot 000 isn't just an anomaly. It's actively rewriting the local spatial tracking. When you used the accompany card, it didn't drop you near me by accident. It dragged you to the heaviest concentration of uncapped Nen in a 500-mile radius. Jing walked to the edge of the circular ruins, pointing out past the massive stone archways into the pitch-black heart of the jungle. About 10 miles out, there's a colossal, subterranean sinkhole the locals used to call the Hollow Horizon, Jing explained, his voice losing all its casual warmth. It's a massive dead zone where the continent's environmental laws completely break down. The flora there grows upside down, and the gravity shifts every 20 minutes. I've been trying to chart a path inside for 3 weeks, but the entrance is guarded by a high-tier biological disaster. A disaster? Gon asked, leaning forward as Kahlua tightly wrapped his arm. A colony of threat level. Zobei symbiotes, Jing said flatly. They aren't monsters you can just punch. They're airborne, microscopic entities that feed directly on standard Nen aura. The stronger your Ten or Ken, the faster they burrow into your skin to turn you into a mindless, immortal husked shell. Naruto's lazy posture vanished, his eyes sharpening as he looked down at his golden, pulsing binder. They eat aura, huh? But what happens if they try to eat something that isn't made of Nen at all? Jing's lips curved into a sharp, dangerous smirk. That's exactly what we're going to find out. Your out-of-bounds energy might just be the literal hazmat suit we need to break the front door open. The trek to the Hollow Horizon took them through a landscape that defied every law of nature. As they neared the lip of the colossal sinkhole, the massive trees began to twist downward, their glowing blue roots anchoring into the sky while their heavy, ash-colored leaves brushed against the mossy floor. The air grew thick, cold, and eerily still. When they reached the edge, the ground vanished into a sheer, pitch-black abyss that stretched miles across. Floating just beneath the rim was a dense, shimmering fog of pale violet spores, the airborne colony of the Zobe symbiotes. The fog rippled like a living, breathing entity, pulsing with a faint, predatory hunger whenever a stray spark of Gon's lingering enhancer aura drifted too close. "This is the line," Jing whispered, stopping at the very edge of the stone precipice. "See how the fog twitches? It's hunting for Nen. If any of us steps in there with our aura active, we'll become part of the hive within 5 minutes." "Alright, let's see how these little bugs handle a completely different menu," Naruto said. He stepped up to the edge, his shoulders dropping into a relaxed but highly focused stance. He didn't mold Nen. Instead, he reached deep into his core, drawing upon the clean, sharp friction of his wind-style chakra while simultaneously pulling a thin stream of natural energy from the surrounding terrain. Naruto crossed his index and middle fingers, throwing his hands forward. Wind style, vacuum shell. Instead of a destructive blast, a micro-vortex of highly pressurized, spinning wind erupted from his palms, rapidly expanding into a transparent, dome-like isolation bubble about 10 feet wide. The outer layer of the bubble wasn't solid. It was a furious, microscopic lattice of razor-sharp wind currents spinning at thousands of rotations per second. Naruto nudged the bubble forward, casting it out over the abyss directly into the thickest cluster of the pale violet fog. The moment the isolation bubble breached the perimeter, the Zobe colony reacted violently. The violet spores swarmed the spinning wind dome like a cloud of ravenous locusts, attempting to latch onto the energy field to drain it. But the moment the microscopic entities touched the chakra barrier, something completely unprecedented happened. Sizzle! The spores didn't absorb the energy. Because Naruto's chakra was infused with the jagged, cutting nature of wind transformation rather than the smooth, lifelike density of Nen, the microscopic symbionts couldn't recognize it as a food source. Instead, the furious, high-speed physical rotation of the wind dome acted like a massive, molecular blender. The spores were instantly shredded into a fine, inert gray dust that drifted harmlessly down into the dark abyss. "Whoa!" Gon gasped, his eyes wide as he watched the violet fog literally clear away from the bubble. "It's completely destroying them." Kahlua leaned over the edge, his sharp eyes tracking the structural reaction. "Look at the pattern. They aren't just getting cut up, they're actively trying to retreat from it now. They can't adapt to the foreign frequency. Naruto's chakra is absolute poison to them." Jing stared at the expanding clearing in the fog, a massive, brilliant smirk spreading across his bearded face. He slapped Naruto hard on the back, nearly knocking the ninja out of his stance. "Ha ha, I knew it," Jing roared, his eyes flashing with raw excitement. "The system rules don't apply to a completely different universe. You're a walking, talking antidote to the deadliest biological barrier on this continent." "Ow. Hey, watch the jacket, old man." Naruto grumbled, his shoulders instantly dropping into a lazy slouch as he maintained the steady flow of the vacuum dome. He let out a loud, dramatic sigh. "Man, acting as a giant, human bug zapper for a massive underground sinkhole is way too much work. Seriously, what a total drag." "Quit complaining," Kahlua smirked, his knuckles sparking with a faint, anticipatory hum of lightning as he stepped up to the edge beside Gon. "You just opened the front door. Let's go see what's at the bottom of this hole." "Right." Gon cheered, his wrapped arm held steady against his chest. With Naruto's wind isolation bubble expanding to form a flawless, protective corridor through the lethal fog, the four of them leapt off the obsidian edge, diving straight into the upside-down gravity of the hollow horizon. The descent into the hollow horizon was a total trip. The moment they cleared the shredded Zobe fog, the gravity flipped entirely. Up became down, down became up, and suddenly they were running horizontally along the smooth, glowing white masonry of an ancient, inverted city. After hours of charting the surreal, upside-down labyrinth and dodging spatial anomalies that shifted like liquid glass, Jing finally called a halt in the sheltered courtyard of a massive, ruined palace. The air here was crisp, clear of the spores, and completely silent. "All right, let's camp here for the night," Jing said, dropping his heavy hunter's pack onto the stone floor with a dull thud. He stretched his back, wincing slightly. It's going to take me at least a couple of hours to scrape together enough dry, inverted moss to build a decent fire. Finding resources in a dead zone is a massive pain. Naruto, who had been slouched against a fallen pillar with his hands tucked into his pockets, let out a low, mischievous chuckle. A couple of hours? Man, you hunter guys really like doing things the hard way. What a total drag. Killua smirked, instantly catching on. Hey, Naruto, show the old man how a real master handles a campsite. Watch and learn, Dad. Gon grinned, crossing his arms proudly. Jing's eyebrow shot up, clearly skeptical. Oh, you guys got a hidden survival skill I don't know about? Better, Naruto said, his eyes sparking with sudden excitement. He unclipped a thick, heavy storage scroll from the back of his tool pouch and unrolled it across the smooth stone floor with a dramatic snap. The white parchment was covered in intricate, looping black ink formulas, the ancient kanji arrays of the Uzumaki sealing arts. Naruto bit his thumb, slammed his palm flat against the center of the geometric array, and channeled a sharp spark of chakra. Sealing technique. Release. Poof. A massive, incredibly dense cloud of white smoke erupted, completely filling the courtyard. When the haze cleared, Jing's jaw literally dropped. Sitting perfectly in the center of the ruins was a massive, fully assembled, multi-room weatherproof expedition tent, complete with reinforced carbon fiber poles and insulated lining. But Naruto wasn't done. He unrolled a second, smaller scroll, slapping his palm down with another energetic poof. Out materialized a premium, portable 3-burner stove, a massive cast iron skillet, a full crate of fresh, vacuum-sealed Ichiraku ramen ingredients, broth, pork belly, soft-boiled eggs, and green onions, and a stack of plush, self-inflating memory foam sleeping pads. To top it off, a final seal released a perfectly stacked pile of dry, seasoned oak firewood and a specialized battery-powered lantern that instantly bathed the dark ruins in a warm, cozy glow. In less than 3 seconds, a bleak, hyper-lethal ancient ruin in the Dark Continent had been converted into a luxury, high-end base camp. What the? Jing muttered, walking over to the tent and poking the high-grade fabric with a bewildered finger. He looked from the steaming crate of fresh food to the complex ink arrays on the parchment. This is a localized spatial pocket storage system. There's no Nen emission attached to this at all. It's entirely self-contained ink geometry. Fuinjutsu, sealing arts, Naruto said, puffing his chest out with absolute, unadulterated pride. The lazy slouch was completely gone, replaced by the sheer, infectious joy of a ninja showing off his ultimate convenience tech. I sealed all this stuff back before we even entered the final phases of Greed Island. You can fit an entire apartment into a piece of paper if you know how to balance the script, believe it. It's the best thing ever, Killua chuckled, already walking over to the stove and expertly tossing the seasoned pork belly into the skillet, the savory sizzle instantly filling the alien air. No foraging, no sleeping on cold rocks, and no eating swamp root paste. Being traveling buddies with a seal master is basically a cheat code. Gon laughed, sitting cross-legged on one of the incredibly soft sleeping pads, his bruised arm feeling instantly better in the warmth of the camp. Jing, you've been exploring the world for years, but I bet you've never had a camp like this. Jing looked at the intricate seals on the paper, then at the steaming bowl of high-grade ramen Naruto was already happily assembling, and a massive, begrudging grin broke across his face. He sat down on the pad next to Gon, shaking his head in pure admiration. All right, Jing laughed, reaching for a pair of chopsticks. I give in. Your universe's rule-breaking is officially the greatest thing that ever happened to this expedition. The savory aroma of roasting pork belly and rich miso broth drifted up toward the inverted stone ceiling, creating a bizarrely comforting pocket of domestic warmth in the heart of the lethal abyss. Jing took a massive, steaming bite of the ramen Naruto had handed him, his eyes instantly widening. Holy hell, this is incredible. The noodles are perfectly firm, the broth has actual depth. I've been living on dehydrated trail rations and raw lizard meat for 6 months. You have no idea how good this is. Hee hee, right? Naruto beamed, slurp eating his own massive bowl with zero manners, completely in his element. Ichiraku's recipe is the absolute best in the world. I made sure to seal enough portions to feed an entire battalion before we left. A real ninja always prepares for the worst-case scenario, especially when it comes to lunch. A real ninja just likes to overpack, Kahlua chimed in smoothly, leaning back against one of the plush memory foam sleeping pads with his hands behind his head. He looked thoroughly relaxed, a faint, contented smirk on his face as he watched the glowing lantern light dance across the ancient white walls. But hey, I'm not complaining. Fighting that multi-limbed nightmare back in the jungle really took it out of me. This is exactly what we needed. Gon sat next to them, eating with his left hand while his injured right arm rested comfortably in the cool, soothing wrap. He looked at the massive expedition tent, then at Naruto's intricate storage scrolls resting on the stone floor, and finally at his father. For the first time in his life, he wasn't looking at Jing as a distant, unreachable shadow to hunt down. They were just two people sharing a meal under the stars of a broken world. "Hey, Jing," Gon said softly, setting his bowl down. "What exactly is at the very bottom of the hollow horizon? You said the laws of the environment break down here." Jing's chewing slowed. He set his empty bowl down on the stone, his expression shifting from the relaxed camper back to the deeply calculating explorer. He leaned forward, pointing a chopstick toward the darker, echoing depths of the palace courtyard where the stone floor seemed to fade into a strange, localized shimmer. "The records from the ancient human expeditions call it the Mirror Vault," Jing explained, his voice quiet against the ambient hum of the ruins. "The gravity shifts and the upside-down flora are just side effects of what's leaking out from below. Down at the absolute core of this sinkhole, there's a massive, natural spatial rift, a tear in the fabric of this continent's reality." Naruto stopped slurping, his blue eyes narrowing slightly as he set his bowl down. The lazy, satisfied smile vanished, replaced by the sharp focus of a shinobi. "A spatial rift? Like a doorway to somewhere else?" "Exactly," Jing nodded, looking directly at Naruto's glitched binder, which was resting right next to the ceiling scrolls. The slot 000 script was pulsing in perfect, synchronized harmony with the deep, rhythmic vibrations coming from the lower levels of the palace. "I used to think it was just a dead gateway left behind by the species that built this city. But seeing how your binder reacted to the accompany card, and how it anchored straight onto this exact valley, I think that rift is a directional beacon. It's a point where the boundaries between different realities are at their thinnest." Kahlua sat up straight, his relaxed posture instantly vanishing as his assassin instincts flared. "Wait, are you saying that rift could be a way to get Naruto back to his own world?" "Or," Jing said, his voice dropping into a dangerous, thrilling whisper, "it's the reason he got pulled into our world in the first place. And right now, something on the other side of that tear is trying to pull back." Suddenly, the warm, battery-powered lantern let out a violent zap, its light flickering rapidly before turning an ominous, deep shade of violet. The storage scrolls on the floor began to vibrate against the stone, the black ink of the ceiling formulas rippling like liquid water. Deep beneath the ancient courtyard, a massive, metallic groan echoed through the masonry, followed by the undeniable sound of the upside-down gravity field violently buckling. "Whoa, whoa, whoa! The structural integrity of the ink is buckling," Naruto yelled, his lazy demeanor vanishing instantly. If those scrolls ruptured under a spatial pull, the hyper-compressed contents, including weeks of rations, pristine camping gear, and volatile explosive tags, would violently expand all at once, leveling the entire courtyard. He dropped his ramen bowl and scrambled across the vibrating stone floor. The black ink loops on the parchment were literally bleeding off the paper, stretched toward the dark depths of the palace by the unseen gravitational tide. "Kahlua, Gon, grab the corners. Don't let the parchment roll up," Naruto barked. Kahlua moved like a silver blur, his hands pinning the top edges of the heavy storage scrolls flat against the shaking masonry, his fingers sparking with tiny needles of electricity to counter the kinetic vibration. Gon lunged forward, using his left hand to weight down the bottom edge, gritting his teeth as the purple-tinted gravity pulse tried to rip the paper clean out of his grip. Naruto didn't hesitate. He bit his thumb again, drawing a fresh line of blood, and slammed both palms onto the bare stone surrounding the storage scrolls. His fingers blurred in a sequence of rapid hand seals: ram, snake, tiger, bird. Fuinjutsu. 5 elements seal, spreading matrix. Thin, jagged lines of glowing blue chakra shot out from his fingertips, racing across the white stone like miniature bolts of lightning. They formed a perfectly geometric, interlocking pentagonal barrier that completely encircled the vibrating scrolls. The moment the chakra matrix locked into place, a heavy, stabilizing pressure slammed down onto the courtyard. The bleeding ink on the scrolls violently snapped back into its original, crisp kanji erase. The erratic, violet glow radiating from the pocket dimensions died down, returning to a calm, inert black. Hiss. A small wisp of white steam escaped the matrix as the spatial pull was completely neutralized. Naruto let out a massive, explosive sigh, dropping his forehead straight onto the stone floor as his shoulders slouched into total exhaustion. Man, adjusting localized space-time parameters on the fly is a total nightmare. Seriously, what a drag. Nice save, Kahlua muttered, slowly lifting his hands and checking the paper. The seals were locked tight. If that exploded, we would have been buried under 10 tons of instant noodles and camping gear. Jing stepped up to the edge of the blue chakra matrix, his eyes wide with absolute fascination as he traced the geometric lines with his finger. Incredible, you didn't just counter the pull, you created an isolated localized gravity sink to shield the ink's frequency. The logic behind your universe's ceiling grid is completely independent of environmental decay. He looked down into the dark, shimmering corridor where the metallic groaning was growing louder. The purple light was pulsing like a steady, rhythmic heartbeat. The seal will hold the camp, Jing said, his expression sharpening into absolute focus as he hoisted his heavy hunter's pack. But the mirror vault below just felt your chakra, Naruto. It's adapting. If we don't move right now, that spatial rift is going to tear itself wide open. Naruto remained face down on the stone for a split second longer, but his eyes suddenly closed as his consciousness shifted inward. Deep within his subconscious mind, behind the massive, ancient iron gates of his inner seal, a pair of colossal, slit-pupil crimson eyes slowly opened in the dark. A low, rumbling growl vibrated through Naruto's entire spiritual core, warm and heavy. Naruto, Kurama's booming voice echoed, devoid of its old malice but carrying a sharp, ancient gravity. Stop slouching in your own head. Look closer at what's happening out there. Naruto stepped forward in his mindscape, splashing through the shallow water of his consciousness. Kurama, what is it? You feel that weird energy from the rift too? The rift is one thing, the 9 tails rumbled, its massive orange tails shifting slowly behind the bars. But look at the biological signatures of the monsters in this place. The multi-limbed thing you just thrashed with the brat, and the way the aura carries a raw, unfiltered natural pressure. Naruto blinked. What about them? They're just really tough, oversized bugs. No, you idiot, Kurama scoffed, a deep, guttural chuckle shaking the mindscape. Think back to the old records of your clan. Before the hidden villages were built, before the Sage of 6 Paths split my chakra. What did the ancient Uzumaki fight in the untamed parts of our world? Naruto's eyes widened as a sudden realization hit him. The summoning beasts? No, the giant, unformed monsters. The wild chakra beasts that the Uzumaki built their first sealing techniques to lock away. Exactly, Kurama said, leaning his massive muzzle closer to the bars. The environment of this dark continent isn't just a different map. It's an untamed ecosystem running on pure, volatile life force. The creatures here don't use refined, nen, or chakra logic. They are living masses of raw energy, just like the ancient entities your ancestors sealed into shrines and scrolls centuries ago. That's why your Fuinjutsu is working so perfectly here. The Uzumaki arts were literally designed to suppress exactly this kind of primeval world. Kurama's crimson eyes flashed with a dangerous, proud light. The human world you just left was a curated playground. This place? This is the kind of wild, chaotic frontier where your clan's power was forged. Don't let your guard down, but don't hold back either. Let's see what this continent can throw at us. Right. Naruto grinned, a fierce, stubborn spark returning to his face. Naruto's eyes snapped open in the real world. He pushed himself up from the stone floor, his lazy slouch completely gone as he dusted off his orange pants. He looked down at the dark, shimmering corridor leading into the lower levels of the palace, his fingers resting firmly on the hilt of his weapon pouch. "Hey, old man," Naruto said, his voice dropping its whining drawl, replaced by the confident, sharp tone of a seasoned ninja. "Forget about the extraction boat. My partner inside just clued me in on what this place really is." Kahlua glanced at him, his silver hair catching the flickering purple light of the corridor. "Your partner? The one inside your seal?" "Yeah," Naruto nodded, giving Gon and Kahlua a warm, fiercely determined grin. "Turns out my ancestors used to deal with wild, oversized disasters exactly like this for breakfast. If the bottom of this sinkhole wants to pull us in, let's go show it how an Uzumaki handles a chaotic map, believe it." Jing looked at Naruto, a massive, thrilled grin breaking across his bearded face as he adjusted his pack. "That's exactly the kind of unhinged confidence you need to survive out here. Let's move." Jing, Gon, and Kahlua all froze, their eyes locked onto Naruto. The atmospheric shift in the courtyard was dizzying, not just because of the warped, upside-down gravity, but because Naruto's entire presence had just radically transformed. The lazy, complaining kid who had been moping about instant noodles was gone. Standing before them was a young man whose posture radiated the unshakable authority of a battlefield veteran. The air around him suddenly felt heavy, charged with a warm, dense, and incomprehensibly vast natural pressure that didn't emit a single drop of nen. "Your ancestors dealt with things like this?" Kahlua asked, his voice uncharacteristically tentative. His assassin instincts, which were finely tuned to calculate threat levels down to the millisecond, were completely misfiring. He looked at Naruto, then down at the glowing blue chakra matrix stabilizing the scrolls. "You're saying your family built an entire martial discipline just to lock away continents like this?" "Pretty much," Naruto said, offering a casual, two-finger salute. "The old records call them primeval chakra entities. Basically, giant, angry masses of raw natural energy that didn't like staying in one place. If you didn't seal them, they'd swallow entire countries." Gon stared at Naruto, his jaw slightly slack, his large brown eyes shining with absolute wonder. "Wow, so the whole time we were training on Greed Island, you were already carrying the power to fight a whole continent?" "It's not just the power, Gon," Jing cut in, his voice unusually quiet. For a triple-star hunter who prided himself on knowing the hidden histories of the world, Jing looked utterly floored. He walked slowly around Naruto, his eyes scanning the faint, golden wisps of energy beginning to trace along the teenage ninja's skin. "I've spent my entire life tracking down the shards of ancient civilizations," Jing muttered, rubbing the back of his scruffy neck as a genuine, bewildered laugh escaped his lips. "I thought the people who built these ruins were unique. But your clan, they didn't just survive the primeval era. They mastered the geometry required to suppress it. You're not an anomaly, Naruto. You're a walking, talking evolutionary countermeasure to the Dark Continent itself." Jing shook his head, looking down the shimmering, violet corridor where the metallic groaning of the space-time rift was steadily accelerating. The profound shock on his face quickly melted into a wide, almost manic grin. "Man, the world outside the map is so much bigger than I thought. I love it." "All right, enough sightseeing," Kahlua snapped, though his eyes were still wide with lingering disbelief as he adjusted his stance. "The walls are starting to fracture. If we're going to dive into a localized reality tear, we should probably do it before the ceiling lands on our heads." "Right," Gon cheered, his adrenaline completely masking the ache in his bruised arm. "Let's go, Naruto." Naruto smirked, pulling his hands out of his pockets and falling into a smooth, low-profile sprint. "Keep close, guys. Don't step outside the boundary lines of my matrix, believe it." With Jing leading the charge and Naruto's newly awakened ancestral confidence anchoring their vanguard, the four of them bolted down the glowing white steps, diving straight into the flashing, hyperspatial depths of the mirror vault. The stone walls of the descending spiral staircase began to split, glowing purple fractures spider webbing across the ancient masonry. The gravitational pull from the mirror vault was no longer just shifting, it was tearing, pulling at their clothes, their hair, and their very balance. Runaway spatial currents whipped past them like invisible blades. But as they sprinted deeper into the shaking, violet-hued abyss, Naruto let out a sudden, bright laugh. The tense, rigid posture of the other three seemed to falter for a split second as they looked back at him in sheer confusion. "What are you laughing at, idiot?" Killua yelled over the deafening roar of the collapsing temple. "If the spatial rift buckles completely, we're going to be shredded into atomic dust." "Oh, relax." Naruto grinned, his thumb catching his forehead protector in a familiar, cocky gesture. "I just remembered something. If this whole place completely falls apart and we find ourselves in a real jam, we don't actually have to worry about getting trapped." Jing glanced back over his shoulder, his eyes narrowing. A spatial rift of this magnitude overrides standard physical escape routes. If the gateway collapses, it locks the local dimension tight. What kind of trick do you have up your sleeve to bypass a hard spatial lock? Naruto reached down to his weapon pouch, pulling out a heavy, uniquely shaped three-pronged kunai. Wrapped tightly around the hilt was a strip of parchment covered in a distinct, hand-drawn seal formula. "See this mark?" Naruto said, spinning the heavy dagger on his finger before sliding it securely into the stone wall of the corridor as they sprinted past. "It's a flying Raijin marker. My dad's spatial jutsu. The moment we touched down in that campsite above, I slipped a matching marker right under the frame of our giant tent." Gon blinked, his boots skidding slightly on a vibrating step. "A marker? What does it do?" "It's an instant, absolute spatial contract," Naruto explained, his grin widening. "It doesn't care about distance, gravity, or whatever weird rules this continent tries to throw at us. The moment I activate the formula, the space between us and that marker folds to zero. Even if this whole vault collapses into a black hole, I can grab all three of you and snap us straight back to our cozy little campsite in a literal millisecond." Killua stared at the gleaming three-pronged blade sticking out of the wall, his jaw dropping for what felt like the 10th time tonight. You can teleport? Instantly? Across dimensions and gravity locks?" "Yup," Naruto chirped, "though it takes a ton of chakra to drag 4 people at once, so I'd rather not do it unless we're about to get completely squashed. But it means we have a guaranteed exit ticket, believe it." Jing stopped dead in his tracks for a fraction of a second, staring at the kunai, then at Naruto, before letting out a sharp, breathless whistle. The sheer, overwhelming utility of Naruto's foreign physics was almost absurd. A spatial anchor that ignores dimensional locking. Jing muttered, his voice thick with a mix of utter bewilderment and profound respect. He shook his head, a wild, sharp laugh bubbling up from his chest. "Kid, you're not just a cheat code. You're an entire walkthrough guide. All right then, if our safety net is cast, let's stop holding back. Let's see what's at the bottom of this damn vault." With their exit guaranteed, the heavy, suffocating fear of the unknown vanished, replaced by an electric surge of absolute confidence. Together, the 4 of them leapt off the final crumbling step, diving headfirst into the swirling, violet heart of the mirror vault. They hit the bottom of the vault, but there was no ground to meet them. The moment they breached the shimmering purple threshold, the sensation of falling vanished. They found themselves floating, or rather, standing on nothing, in a colossal, starless void that stretched out infinitely. Hovering directly ahead of them was the source of the chaos, a massive, erratic tear in reality that looked like a jagged fracture in dark glass. Through the cracks, blinding ribbons of golden and azure energy were violently pulsing, casting long, fractured shadows across their faces. "So this is the mirror vault," Killua whispered, his silver hair floating lightly in the zero-gravity environment. He looked down at his feet, then back up at the rift. "The spatial pressure here is insane. It feels like the air itself is trying to pull my aura right out of my pores." "It's not the air," Jing said, his voice dropping all its previous humor as he drifted toward the front of the group. He pointed a steady finger at the glowing edges of the tear. "Look at the way the energy is cycling. It's not exploding outward, it's inhaling. The rift is pulling natural energy from the dark continent, but because Naruto's binder anchored onto it, the frequency is converting into something else. Gon drifted up beside Naruto, his eyes fixed on the golden needle projecting from slot 000 of the glitched binder. The light from the book was no longer just a needle. It had stretched into a thick, solid tether of pure chakra that connected directly into the center of the fracture. Naruto, Gon said, his voice quiet but intense. Look at your book. The symbols, they aren't just flickering anymore. They're changing into words. Naruto unclipped the binder, holding it steady in the weightless void. The glitched neon script had stopped its chaotic rotation. Now, clear, distinct lines of ancient text were printing themselves across the leather cover, burning with the bright, warm essence of sage chakra. The boundary is a mirror. Naruto read the scrolling script in his mind, his eyes narrowing. To restore the balance, the anchor must be claimed. The anchor? Naruto muttered, scratching his head as his signature lazy slouch briefly threatened to return. Man, even across universes, these ancient ruins love giving cryptic homework. What a total drag. It means exactly what it says, brat. Kurama's voice rumbled deep within his consciousness, louder and clearer than before. The rift isn't just a random hole. It's a localized knot created when your dimensional displacement intersected with this continent's raw life force. If you don't use your ceiling grid to knot it tightly from this side, the tear will keep expanding until it swallows this entire valley, and our way home along with it. Got it, Naruto murmured aloud. He looked up, his blue eyes flashing with that fierce, stubborn determination. He looked at Gon, Killua, and Jing. All right guys, here's the play. I need to get right up to the edge of that tear to drop a permanent ceiling matrix. But the moment I start molding the chakra, the rift's defense mechanism is going to wake up. As if on cue, the violet fog from the upper levels began to pour through the spatial fractures, rapidly condensing into massive, crystalline shapes that resembled the predatory alpha beasts of the jungle. Only these were entirely composed of compressed, hostile energy. Killua's knuckles violently sparked with a high-frequency electric hum, a sharp, dangerous smirk returning to his face. Let him come. We've got a secure campsite waiting upstairs and a literal instant escape button stuck to the wall. I'm not running from a bunch of glowing ghosts. Me neither. Gon shouted, his left fist already gathering a bright, spinning sphere of pure kinetic aura, his face alive with the thrill of the challenge. Jing pulled a heavy, iron-shod staff from the side of his pack, his crimson nen surging out in a controlled, terrifyingly dense aura burst that stabilized the floating space around them. He looked back at Naruto, his eyes gleaming with the raw pride of an explorer facing the ultimate frontier. Do your job, Seal Master, Jing laughed, a booming sound that echoed perfectly through the void. We'll clear the line. Let's see how this continent handles a real team. With a synchronized roar, Gon, Killua, and Jing launched themselves forward into the weightless expanse, shielding Naruto as he advanced toward the pulsing heart of the rift. Jing stepped into the void ahead of Gon and Killua, his frayed cloak billowing in the weightless turbulence. As the crystalline energy beasts materialized, their translucent, violet forms shifting like jagged shards of glass, Jing didn't drop into a defensive stance. Instead, he simply watched them with wide, analytical eyes, his pupils tracking the internal flow of their violent, pulsing frequencies. Watch closely, Jing said, his voice entirely calm amidst the roaring spatial wind. This is how you deal with a system you don't own. 3 massive, wolf-like crystalline predators lunged forward simultaneously, their jaws open to discharge blinding beams of compressed, raw energy. The speed of the attack was blistering, but Jing didn't move an inch to dodge. He simply held out his bare right hand. In a fraction of a millisecond, the crimson nen surrounding Jing's body violently shifted. It didn't expand to block, it adapted. The color bleached out, transforming into a sharp, vibrating violet that mirrored the exact wave frequency, density, and kinetic rhythm of the approaching beasts down to the last decimal. The lead wolf slammed straight into Jing's open palm. Hiss. There was no explosive impact. The moment the monster's muzzle touched Jing's hand, its structural integrity completely dissolved. Because Jing had perfectly matched its internal frequency, his aura acted like a universal solvent. The wolf's crystalline form simply melted into liquid violet energy, flowing smoothly down Jing's arm and reinforcing his own shroud. What? Kahlua gasped, his silver hair practically standing on end as his analytical mind short-circuited. He didn't just block it, he synchronized with it. He rewrote his own Nen parameters mid-attack. Jing smirked, his eyes flashing with a dangerous, manic brilliance. With his aura now perfectly attuned to the Mirror Vault's defensive program, he vaulted forward. He moved like a ghost, weaving through the remaining pack of energy beasts. Every time his hands or his iron-shod staff made contact with a monster, the creature shattered into harmless, glowing stardust, its defense systems completely dismantled before it could even register a hit. He was essentially hacking the continent's immune system using nothing but sheer, unparalleled aura mastery. "Go, Naruto!" Jing shouted, spinning his staff to shatter the final guardian beast into a cloud of drifting violet particles. "The perimeter is completely clear. Lock this rift down." "Right!" Naruto yelled. He lunged past the vanguard, using a burst of wind chakra to propel himself straight to the jagged edge of the reality tear. The glitched binder in his left hand was burning hot, its pages turning violently as Slot 000 fully opened, casting a massive geometric grid of golden Uzumaki kanji directly across the surface of the glass-like fracture. Naruto slammed his right palm flat against the center of the grid, his face dead serious, his voice echoing with the unified resonance of his own spirit and Kurama's roaring power. Uzumaki ceiling style, boundary lock. The golden ink lines shot across the tear like iron chains, binding the azure and violet energies tightly. The frantic, metallic groaning of the vault instantly quieted, the erratic spatial pull snapping shut as the rift was compressed into a small, perfectly sealed crystalline core floating harmlessly in the void. The weightless zero-gravity field stabilized, slowly lowering the four of them until their boots touched the solid, white stone floor of the newly quieted mirror vault. Naruto let out a massive, theatrical sigh, his posture immediately collapsing back into his signature, lazy slouch as he tucked his hands right back into his orange pockets. Man, bending the laws of two different universes just to close a doorway is way too much overtime. Seriously, what a total drag. Gon laughed, walking up and lightly punching Naruto's shoulder. You did it, Naruto. The rift is stable. Jing walked back over, completely unbothered by the fact that he had just performed a feat of Nen mastery that defied belief. He looked at the sealed core, then at Naruto, a proud, sharp grin breaking through his scruffy beard. Not bad, kid. Not bad at all. Welcome to the Dark Continent. Kahlua let out a long, slow whistle, checking the ambient atmospheric pressure with a quick sweep of his En. The jagged, violent distortions were completely gone. The air felt heavy and ancient, but the terrifying spatial vacuum had vanished. Well, the exit ticket is still stuck to the wall upstairs, but it looks like we won't need to panic button out of here after all. Yeah, Gon agreed, his face beaming as he looked around the now stabilized vault. The white stone walls were glowing with a soft, steady luminescence rather than the violent, flickering purple fractures from before. That was amazing, Naruto. And you too, Jing. I've never seen anyone change their aura like that. Jing shrugged, casually resting his iron-shod staff over his shoulders. It's just basic wave mechanics, Gon. If you understand the nature of the output, you can match the frequency. But what this kid did. He turned his sharp, calculating eyes back to Naruto, who was already staring longingly back up the spiral staircase. That's a permanent structural rewrite. You locked a multi-dimensional tear using nothing but ink logic and raw willpower. Whatever it was, it means the job is done, Naruto grumbled, his stomach letting out a loud, aggressive rumble that echoed clearly across the quiet vault. He rubbed his midriff, his signature lazy slouch returning with full force. And all that dimension snapping completely burned through my dinner. If we don't get back up to that luxury tent and finish the rest of the Ichiraku ramen, I'm gonna pass out right here on the floor. Believe it, Kahlua rolled his eyes, a fond, amused smirk breaking across his face. Unbelievable. You just saved a sector of the most dangerous continent in the world, and your brain is still entirely hardwired to noodles. Priorities, Kahlua, a real ninja knows how to manage his fuel, Naruto fired back, pointing a defensive finger at him. All right, Jing chuckled, waving a hand toward the stairs. The Seal Master has spoken. Let's head back up to that ridiculous luxury base camp of yours. Tomorrow, the real mapping of the Hollow Horizon begins, and I have a feeling having a squad that can rewrite physics is going to make this expedition a hell of a lot more interesting. Gon slammed his left fist into his palm, his eyes shining with the thrill of the uncharted frontier ahead. Right, let's go. With the threat neutralized and the gateway safely secured under the Uzumaki seal, the four of them turned back toward the stairs, leaving the depths of the mirror vault behind as they climbed back toward the warm, glowing light of their improbable sanctuary in the dark. Naruto was halfway up the stairs, complaining loudly to Kahlua about the exact ratio of pork belly to green onions left in the storage scroll, when he froze. His jaw snapped shut, his blue eyes widened, the pupils instantly sharpening into the focused slits of his Sage Mode sensory grid. The lazy, slouching posture vanished so fast it looked like a physical transformation. A thick, electric silence draped over him, making Gon and Kahlua halt a few steps above him. Naruto? Gon asked, looking back down the stone steps. What's wrong? Is the rift? No, Naruto whispered. He turned around slowly, looking back down into the depths of the quieted mirror vault. His voice was trembling, split perfectly between absolute shock and a sudden, fierce rush of adrenaline. No way. This is impossible. What is he doing here? Killua's hand slipped instantly toward his pocket, his sparks humming. Another monster? The seal didn't hold? Not a monster, Naruto breathed, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he locked his gaze on the center of the vault floor. It's a chakra signature. And it's one I'd recognize anywhere in the multiverse. Jing stepped past the boys, his eyes narrowing as he tracked Naruto's gaze. He raised his hand, gesturing for quiet. Even without Naruto's specific sensory grid, Jing's advanced N was picking up a sudden, massive atmospheric displacement. The air in the center of the vault was beginning to warp, twisting into a tight, localized spiral that didn't emit violet dark continent energy, but a cold, pitch black, and overwhelmingly sharp pressure. Crackle! A single, violent bolt of dark lightning struck the white stone floor. The space cracked open, a clean, circular portal of shifting black void manifesting just inches above the ground. From the center of the void, a tall, cloaked figure stepped calmly out onto the ancient masonry. The portal snapped shut behind him with a dull pop, leaving the vault completely silent once more. The man stood tall, a long, high-collared black cloak draping over his frame. A single, dark fringe of hair fell across the left side of his face, obscuring one eye, while his right eye, a piercing, cold obsidian, scanned the bizarre architecture of the upside-down ruins. His left sleeve hung completely empty at his side. He didn't look at Jing, Gon, or Kahlua. His gaze shifted smoothly, locking straight onto the orange-clad ninja standing on the stairs. You're a long way from home, Dobi, Sasuke Uchiha said smoothly, his voice cool, level, and entirely unbothered by the fact that he had just crossed dimensional boundaries. Sasuke? Naruto screamed, his voice echoing violently off the stone walls. He practically tumbled down the remaining stairs, skidding to a halt 10 feet away, his arms flailing in pure, unadulterated bewilderment. How the heck did you get here? And what do you mean I'm a long way from home? You just stepped out of a black hole in the middle of a killer jungle. Sasuke let out a soft, barely audible sigh, the corner of his mouth twitching with the faintest hint of an amused smirk. Your glitched binder was emitting a massive, undisciplined spike of spatial chakra. It felt like a beacon cutting through the dimensional void. I used the space-time dojutsu of my Rinnegan to track the coordinates. He finally turned his gaze toward the other three. His single black eye took in Killua's electricity-ready stance, Gon's wrapped arm, and finally Jing's dense, crimson Nen shroud. Sasuke's eyebrow raised just a fraction. Interesting, Sasuke murmured, his right hand resting casually on the hilt of his Kusanagi sword. The natural energy in this world is incredibly dense. And your new friends don't seem to possess standard chakra networks. Jing stared at the newcomer, his jaw completely slack, his analytical mind struggling to process what he was seeing. For the first time since entering the Dark Continent, the Triple Star Hunter looked completely, utterly speechless. He looked at the empty sleeve, the sword, the strange black lightning, and then at Naruto. Naruto, Jing muttered, his voice shaking with a mix of awe and terror. Is this the rival you told us about? The one who can split mountains? Yeah, Naruto grumbled, his dramatic shock instantly dissolving into a familiar, irritated pout as he crossed his arms. That's him, Sasuke the stick in the mud. Man, I thought I finally got a vacation from his lectures. What a total drag. The five of them made their way back up the twisting spiral staircase, leaving the quieted mirror vault behind. The structural groans of the ruin had entirely subsided, replaced by the crackling pop of seasoned oak firewood drifting down from the courtyard. As they crossed the threshold back into the campsite, the warm glow of Naruto's battery-powered lantern illuminated the space. The contrast was staggering: a hyper-lethal ancient palace courtyard, and multi-room luxury weatherproof tent, and a stack of steaming, freshly assembled bowls of premium Ichiraku ramen waiting on the folding table. Jing walked straight over to the wooden crate, collapsing onto a memory foam sleeping pad with a loud, heavy sigh. He didn't even drop his pack first. He just stared at the ceiling, his hands laced behind his head, a faint, dazed smile stretched across his face. I've spent 30 years mapping out things humanity isn't supposed to see, Jing muttered, his voice echoing lightly against the white masonry. Ruins that warp time, beasts that eat mountains. I thought I had calibrated my expectations for the impossible. But you four. He rolled his head to the side, looking at Naruto and Sasuke. You two are a completely different kind of ridiculous. Sasuke didn't look bothered. He casually surveyed the campsite, his lone obsidian eye lingering briefly on the geometric blue chakra matrix pulsing silently around the storage scrolls. With a smooth, practiced motion of his single arm, he unclasped his high-collared black cloak, draping it over a nearby stone pillar. Beneath it, his standard dark shinobi gear and the clean lines of his kusanagi sword were laid bare. He walked over to the stove, his gaze tracking Kahlua, who was currently adjusting the flame under the broth with expert precision. You have control over the electrical frequency, Sasuke noted, his voice low and even. It isn't lightning release. The bioelectric current is generated directly from your own nervous system. Kahlua didn't flinch. He tossed a handful of fresh green onions into a bowl, offering a sharp, confident smirk. Yeah, caught on quick, didn't you? It's a specialized Nen application. I transform my aura into electricity. Handy for speed, and even better for stunning giant bugs. HMPH. Sasuke closed his eye, a faint, almost imperceptible trace of respect crossing his features. An efficient use of internal biological energy. Better than most lightning-style users who waste half their chakra on flash. Hey, don't go bonding with the new guy over lightning logic, Kahlua. Naruto barked, already sitting cross-legged at the folding table, a fresh bowl of ramen cradled protectively in his hands. He snapped his chopsticks apart with an aggressive crack. Sasuke didn't even answer my question. Did you bring the extra stock from the village or what? I didn't cross a dimensional rift to act as your delivery boy, Naruto, Sasuke said dryly, walking over to the table and gracefully sitting down opposite him. I came because the structural distortion you caused was bleeding into the lower atmosphere of our borders. The Hokage was concerned you'd accidentally tear a hole through the village shrine. Kakashi-sensei worries too much, Naruto mumbled around a massive mouthful of noodles, his cheeks puffing out. I had the ceiling grids completely under control, believe it. Gon sat down next to Naruto, his left hand holding his chopsticks while his wrapped, injured arm rested comfortably in his lap. He looked at Sasuke, his large brown eyes bright with an intense, unblinking curiosity. Sasuke, Gon said suddenly, causing the Uchiha to pause. Naruto told me you guys have the same kind of relationship he had with me and Kahlua. That you left the village for a long time, and he had to chase you down to bring you back. Sasuke's obsidian eye shifted to Gon. The heavy, silent weight of his presence descended on the table, the air cooling slightly. For a second, the courtyard felt like a battlefield again. But Gon didn't blink. He just stared back with that absolute, terrifyingly pure sincerity that defined his entire nature. Beside them, Killua watched the exchange closely, his body relaxed but his muscles primed, ready to drop into Godspeed the moment the cloaked swordsman showed a single violent intent. Sasuke looked from Gon's stubborn face to Naruto, who was suddenly quiet, staring down into his bowl with a soft, reminiscent smile. Something like that, Sasuke said quietly, the cold edge leaving his voice. He reached out with his right hand, picking up the spare pair of chopsticks Killua had set down. Though the Dobi here didn't know when to give up, he has a habit of pushing his way into spaces he wasn't invited. Hey, that's called being a good friend, ya bastard. Naruto grumbled, though his grin was wide and genuine. Jing let out a soft snort from his sleeping pad, finally pulling his pack off and tossing it aside. He sat up, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, his scruffy face lit by the warm lantern light. The raw, manic excitement of the explorer had returned, but it was tempered by the calculated logic of a seasoned hunter. All right, Jing said, drawing a rough map of the sinkhole onto the stone floor with a piece of charcoal he pulled from his pocket. The rift is locked down, our camp is secure, and we've officially doubled our heavy combat units. Tomorrow, we move past the mirror vault. The upside-down architecture continues for another 20 miles before it hits the central core of the continent's life force vein. He looked up, his eyes locking onto Naruto's glitched binder, then onto Sasuke's Kusanagi sword. With Naruto's seals handling the environmental corruption and Sasuke's spatial dojutsu providing a backup radar, we aren't just surviving this expedition anymore, Jing said, a sharp, dangerous smirk breaking through his beard. We're going to chart the whole damn thing. Gon slammed his fist onto the table, his face splitting into a brilliant, unhindered smile. Yeah, let's do it. Killua chuckled, leaning back against the tent frame with his hands behind his head. Just make sure the Seal Master doesn't burn through the rations before we hit the 20-mile mark. Hey, I heard that, Naruto yelled, pointing a chopstick at him. The bickering started up again, a loud, chaotic hum of voices that felt completely absurd given their location in the most hostile territory on the planet. But as the dark, inverted trees of the hollow horizon swayed silently in the distance, the warm perimeter of the camp remained completely unbroken, anchored by the impossible strength of two worlds combined. Naruto poked at his ramen bowl with a pair of chopsticks, his mouth hanging open in a silent, tragic pout. He had watered down the remaining broth to make it stretch, and now he was looking at the soup like it had personally offended him. It's just not the same, Naruto whined, slumping forward until his chin was practically resting on the wooden table. It's missing the kick, you know, the secret red pepper paste Ayame-chan makes. And the pork belly needs that sweet soy glaze. Man, my taste buds are crying. I saved the world and I can't even get a decent bowl of ramen in the middle of a creepy upside-down jungle. Killua rolled his eyes, taking a sip from his own bowl. You've eaten 3 bowls already, you giant baby. Stop crying over spilled broth. It's not spilled, it's diluted. That's a crime against ramen, Killua. Naruto wailed, kicking his legs under the table like a toddler. Sasuke, who had been eating his noodles in elegant, silent contrast to Naruto's chaos, didn't even look up. He set his chopsticks down, reached into his dark ninja pouch with his single hand, and pulled out a tiny, finger-sized storage scroll. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed it across the table. It landed with a soft click right next to Naruto's sad bowl. Open it and shut up, Sasuke said, his voice flat and thoroughly exasperated. You're giving me a headache. Naruto blinked, his blue eyes instantly lighting up. He grabbed the scroll, bit his thumb, and slapped his palm onto the tiny paper. Poof! A tiny puff of white smoke cleared to reveal 3 things. A jar of deep red, perfectly seasoned Ichiraku chili paste, a small vacuum-sealed pouch of sweet soy glazed pork belly slices, and a perfectly wrapped, fresh tomato. No way. Naruto gasped, his face splitting into a look of pure, unadulterated ecstasy. He looked like a kid on his birthday. You actually went to Ichiraku's before you left. Sasuke, you're literally the best. I knew you loved me. Sakura packed it, Sasuke muttered immediately, his cheek resting on his hand as he looked away, a faint, localized shadow of a scowl on his face. She said if I didn't bring it, you'd starve yourself out of spite. I only brought it so I wouldn't have to listen to you whine. Yeah, blame Sakura-chan, Naruto grinned mischievously, already dumping half the chili paste into his bowl and practically vibrating with joy. But you had to seal the pork belly yourself to keep it warm, didn't you? Admit it, you used your own fire style to prep the seal. Sasuke's single visible eye narrowed. Eat your noodles, Dobi, or I'll burn them to ash. Gon leaned over, watching the exchange with a huge, fascinated grin. Wow, Sasuke acts really grumpy, but he really takes care of you, Naruto. It's like when Killua secretly buys the chocolate balls I like even when he says they're a waste of money. Hey, I do not. Killua snapped, his face instantly flushing a bright, embarrassed red. If Gon wants to rot his teeth, that's his business. See? Exactly like that, Naruto laughed, pointing a chopstick covered in chili paste at Killua. He then turned his big, blue, puppy dog eyes toward Sasuke, leaning across the table with a theatrical grin. Hey, Sasuke, since you're being so nice, can you use your Amaterasu to light the campfire? The black fire looks way cooler than regular fire. Pretty please? Just a tiny spark? Absolutely not, Sasuke said flatly. I am not wasting my Mangekyo Sharingan to make your campsite look cool. Ah, come on, just a little bit? For your best friend? Naruto pouted, puffing his cheeks out and leaning even closer. Jing, who was sitting on his sleeping pad watching the entire display, let out a slow, amazed breath. He rubbed the back of his neck, shaking his head. Unbelievable, Jing muttered under his breath, a dazed chuckle escaping his lips. The two strongest beings in their universe, and they're basically a spoiled kid and his enabling older brother. I swear, the further we get into this continent, the less sense the world makes. He's not my brother, Sasuke muttered, though he made no move to reclaim the tomato Naruto had already snatched from the table and was happily biting into like an apple. Yeah, keep telling yourself that, bastard. Naruto mumbled around a mouthful of tomato and ramen, his eyes crinkling with pure, childish satisfaction. He was completely at peace, slurping his upgraded soup in the middle of a world-ending ruin without a single care in the world. Killua shook his head, leaning over to Gon. Look at him. He's basically a toddler who happens to possess the power to level a mountain range. It's a miracle his world survived at all if he was the one leading the charge. But that's what makes Naruto so great, Gon said, his voice bright and completely genuine. He doesn't let all that scary stuff change who he is. When I was fighting in East Gordo, everything felt so heavy. But seeing Naruto like this makes me feel like we can handle anything the Dark Continent throws at us. Killua's expression softened, a small, quiet smile touching his lips. Yeah, I guess you're right about that. Across the table, Sasuke set his empty bowl down with a soft click. He looked at the rough charcoal map Jing had drawn on the stone floor, his Rinnegan catching the flickering lantern light beneath his bangs. The central core of this continent's life force. You said it's 20 miles from here, Hunter? Jing sat up, his eyes instantly locking onto Sasuke's. Yeah, but that 20 miles is through a vertical jungle where gravity completely flips every few hundred yards. The local fauna adapts to the spatial shifts, meaning they can strike from angles you can't even perceive. Plus, the deeper we go, the more the air itself becomes saturated with raw, predatory aura. Anomalies in the flow of natural energy. Sasuke closed his eye, his mind already calculating. I can track the spatial fissures with my sight. If we encounter a gravity pocket, I can swap our positions with the stable ground ahead before the shift registers. Jing stared at him, a slow, wild grin spreading across his face. You can swap positions? Instantaneous displacement? Man, between your eyes and the kid's ceiling grids, we're basically playing with loaded dice. Hey, don't leave us out. Gon chimed in, pointing to himself and Killua. Killua's faster than lightning, and my Jajunkin can shatter those crystalline beasts even if they try to block. Yeah, we know you two are muscle-brained powerhouses, Killua smirked, flicking Gon's forehead. But right now, we need a watch rotation. We're still in the middle of an active ruin, and I don't trust those gravity wolves to stay polite while we sleep. I'll take the first watch, Sasuke said, standing up and grabbing his black cloak. He leapt silently onto the high stone archway overlooking the camp, landing without making a single sound. He sat down, resting his chin on his fist, his dark silhouette blending perfectly into the shadows of the ancient ceiling.